I'm part of my name is Helmut Zurner. I'm part of the European product organization, and my team's focus is specifically on SDN products. So what we do is actually two things. We help sales to bring this to the customers, and of course we work with our customers, and then it's product development where we are working together globally on, developing this. So. All right. Alfonso was kind of having a very nice introductional slide about how cars and airplanes changed. So where are we with this talk today? I hope you had a chance to listen to Peter yesterday when he gave Verizon's view for enabling the real-time enterprise. Then we had David talking about cross-carrier interconnect, and we had a session on ZTP where Chris and myself were talking yesterday about. So today, when we talk about operationalizing, I want to use an analogy that is maybe a bit linked to what we heard from Alfonso. If you just look at an autonomous car as a good example, when putting that into production, you probably have two areas of things that you can start to work on, right? One is more mechanical and electric basic things, like you have to make sure your engines are working and your brakes, right? That's pretty straightforward. But then, of course, there are things that are probably more coming along your way when you start a journey, and where you need a lot of variables and parameters to take into consideration, like the environment. Yeah, when there is snow overnight on your street, all of a sudden your autonomous systems will probably behave a bit differently. And I think this is the case here with orchestration as well. There is some basic stuff that you can do, but once you take it into production, then you quickly discover that there is more behind. So that is what I want to demystify a bit today. And just quickly, we heard this now in various sessions and presentations, so there is no magic when we talk about the drivers. We definitely have something that is scaling, and as one of the drivers for automation, scaling means in the number of devices that we want to do, devices, solutions, whatever comes with that, but also in how efficiently we manage it afterwards and we repair it, right? So our customers, if they are large enterprises, they don't come to us just with 5 devices. So we have to make sure that on a large scale this works well, and not just by the speed we do it, but by repeating stuff in a consistent way that the customers have a unique service experience. Then, of course, when we talk about processes that are non-automated, we all know how cumbersome it can be at times to have a very consistent and unique service experience there, just by the many interfaces that we have to link together, so we quickly can turn out into a heterogeneous process when we deploy managed network services. So here we want to use automation to kind of simplify that and potentially also eliminate a couple of steps that we consider to be not optimal. Yeah, so we redesign and tweak the whole thing. Then of course. When we look further down, if you deploy or manage a solution, or if you repair it, the more touch points you have there, the higher is your risk of injecting errors into whatever you do. So by eliminating some of these touch points, putting automation into place, that risk can go down. So a lot of discussions are then around deploying services in an automated way or managing them, but what is about the next thing that happens once you have deployed them, right? So here then we are in a region where we talk about automatic break fix, because that is where you have to pay attention next. Once your service is into production, you have to make sure you have a very good closed loop assurance system here that allows you to manage repairs efficiently. Then again, if you are in large enterprise business, there will be always something that looks like a one-off or that is really a one-off, right? So when you have automated things in a consistent way, how do you deal with that? Yeah, you cannot just say, well, go look for somebody else because this is a valuable customer, so you have to adapt a strategy to deal with that. And I have something in the appendix. If there is time, we can just have a look at what one possible solution could look like. So what is it then in terms of lessons learned that we could address a bit in greater detail here? First of all, follow one strategy. So why one strategy, and why OpenStack, you could ask. So one strategy, clearly, when you automate, you just need to be aware that this is not just spinning up a virtual machine somewhere and then you say the job is done. It is a full ecosystem that you have to put your service into, right? So you talk about things that go maybe cross-carrier. You need to keep in mind how you interface with your customer. You have a controller, you have all kind of, or multiple controllers, yeah? You have your core network services, you have your hardware, your white boxes, universal CPEs, your cloud resources. And all that has to work together. So how many solutions do you think can develop and support? Yeah. So messages here, focus on one solution and drive that through. OpenStack is for Verizon the layer that we brought into our orchestration to manage resources efficiently, where we believe gives us all the flexibility in terms of managing the hardware, putting those open interfaces out that we can interfere with our vendors that we use for the appliances, for the resources, and even for our customers who are often challenging us by saying this is all good, but it is not enough. We want to put our own appliances on your white box. So and you need to think about that as well. So OpenStack, we think, is giving us the tools that are very useful there. So then, new look and feel automation, and this goes maybe a bit to the slide that Alfonso was showing, where you have this nice cockpit from a car. Maybe I think it was from the 80s. Well, looking at it, where you had your tape deck there, and of course no cup holder, right? So there is a new look and feel today in cars, and we have to have a new look and feel here for orchestration as well. So maybe using another analogy, when there was time that on PCs or workstations we had these graphical user interfaces coming up, so like Windows or the X system in Unix. You could still have a command line interface that would work pretty well, but it had no look and feel, right? So it was only the natively developed solutions then within that graphical system environment that gave you the look and feel. So automation is not just about spinning up a resource. You really need to think about stuff that comes on top, like license management. Just one example. You want that to be part of the way how you do things, or some security-related aspects for authentication and device management and so on. So that is the new look and feel, and without that, automation will just, struggle initially a bit. So virtual is not physical for our vendors. I mean, we face sometimes the situation that the stuff from the physical world is just, being mapped to the virtual reality one-to-one, which is causing some issues. Just one example can be, license verification on a device if you just link that to your CPU ID. Well, in a virtual environment, that's probably causing some issues right from start. So quickly back to the drawing board for that, and the same is true for maybe license sizing. So if you have a physical device, a CPU, a server, whatever you want in that space, it sits on a shelf, it has a gig interface, you use it or not, you max it out or not, it still comes at a price, so you have to use it. Yeah, but this is causing some issues when you go virtual, because there, if you need to buy a license of a certain size that goes with the same analogy, you are not using your service efficiently, and your customer may not be happy the way how you sell that service then to him. So messages here, we need more efficient ways to handle that. The next one, virtual functions are not just virtual machines. It's related to the fact that a virtual service comes with a couple of attributes that potentially you need to preserve state with, right? So IP addresses, or you may even have network lines or MPLS services connected to that. So if you just spin machines up and down, if you want to automate to repair that, you cannot just say it pops up again and all is good. You really need to bear these stateful things in mind when you do automation, and that doesn't make your task easier necessarily. But it is a pretty important one. So finally then, traditional high availability concepts. They often go into the direction that you say, I do hot standby, I do cold standby, I do it with a one-to-one redundancy, for example. So this goes back a bit into what I said here. Virtual is not physical, right? So if you just have to keep two virtual services that all have 1 gig up and running just for redundancy, that's not efficient, right? So it is also not efficient to maybe do it in cold standby and just spin up your backup service then once you need it, because we know that that is not taking seconds but rather minutes to achieve. So not ideal. Then what is the solution? So again, we need to think about new ways how to handle this, and one could be to think about ways how to do one-to-end redundancy. Yeah, which of course requires, just from a license perspective, new ways of how to manage things in a more microservices manner, if I may use that word. So these are a couple of things. This list is of course not exclusive, but it is just, some of the challenges that we have addressed by putting operations into production. There are of course a couple of other statements that are related directly or indirectly to this. So more general in nature. If you just look at a message that we have probably heard here from other speakers a couple of times, don't start just by thinking that you can automate what you have out. Yeah, you need to start maybe with a core that you consider as your starting point, and then add layers next to it, one by one. If you just want to automate what is out there, we have heard it with the nice example. There are no simple solutions to complex problems, right? So that is absolutely something that is correct and true. So then this is a message that we have been we're able to make that clear as well here. We need to see this as an ecosystem, not just as individual silos where you do certain things. An ecosystem goes vertical, it goes horizontal. Yeah, you have to include your customer. I brought that example where customers are challenging us and saying, okay, I want to put more stuff on a universal CPE, and potentially I want to have new ways of managing it. We need to go cross-carrier. If you have a weak link on provisioning your access, you can spin up virtual machines in a minute. If it takes 6 weeks to deliver your access service, your customer may not be happy. So that is all about the ecosystem. Then robustness and scalability. I think carrier grade is a nice buzzword. It's all about rolling services out in a reliable way, but it's also about onboarding them. So we definitely need to make sure that the choice that we give out to the customers is being put into a framework that you can onboard, test, and really make sure the solutions that we put out are scalable enough at the numbers that our customers are expected from in the enterprise business. So the last one, work with customers, have them a seat at the table, and make sure that the lessons are learned not just internally, but that you work this jointly. And that is kind of the final statement here. I think we still have some time, so I was talking about the one-offs, and how do you put that into automation? And no one has magic answers to that. Of course, there are various ways how to do it. This pretty much depends from how you build your services and how you manage them. But I think if you just want to bear this in mind, this is not a black and white thing, right? So it is never an all or nothing. So what this means is have a good understanding how you can decompose your solution into bits and pieces, right? And there may be bits and pieces from an automation perspective that you will never be automating, and that's okay, as long as you know that, and that you consider it, right? And then you have all these other things. And if you do it that way, when you get this, what we call a one-off, yeah, this actually can turn into a deviation just from what you had initially. Without that, you need to rebuild the whole thing, right? So all of a sudden, you have the standard A1, and the nice thing is you have a solution that is compatible with your customer ask. So I hope this was useful, and we still have some time for questions.
Great, fascinating, and you're kind of picking up on what Peter talked about yesterday, that some customers come in with a request of something new, but you can look at it as, well, other enterprises may request this as well. How might it fit into our regular service set eventually? So this is how you deal with it to start with.
Yeah.
So I have one question. You said you need to test the new services at scale before you make sure that they will be scalable. How do you do that?
Well, I think testing is a complex topic, and we often hear about onboarding and compliance when you deploy new VNS services. Yeah. So this is just making sure that your service is compatible with the environment, right? But there is a lot more that you have to do, and you have to first understand your service chains, right? So what does that do to this onboarding thing then? Right, you have to understand what happens if you just change a couple of trivial things, like swapping devices, swapping appliances in the service chain. Yeah? What happens if your firewall is not sitting on the LAN but on the WAN all of a sudden? Right? Is that then the same, or do you need to change things? So there is another aspect here to that. When we talk about automating the repair process, all your error messages that will pop up there, how do you onboard that? You cannot ignore it, because closed loop assurance has to work as well, as I would just make. So this kind of is not the answer directly to how do you do it, but definitely you need a solution that accounts for all of that.
Thank you.